I think we waited too long to have this wake up. Even before we had to the political divide, what we should have learned from how we were using technology was that we can't keep storing our thoughts, our dreams, our research, our histories on devices.
Welcome to the Shaping Freedom podcast, where we dive into conversations that inspire personal growth, transformation, and clarity in challenging times. I'm your host, Lisanne Basquiat. Today, I am honored to sit down with someone who truly understands the power of storytelling, not just as a form of entertainment, but as a tool for self-definition, resistance, and cultural transformation. Phill Branch is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, writer, professor, and Moth Grand Slam champion, whose work sits at the intersection of identity, race, and media representation. Through his acclaimed documentary, Searching for Shinnequa, Phill sparked a necessary conversation about the biases attached to names and the deeper implications of how society categorizes people. As a professor at Gujarat College, he teaches students how media shapes our perceptions of race and culture at a time when those narratives are being both challenged and manipulated. And as a storyteller, he helps people take ownership of their lived experiences, transforming personal truths into powerful tools for connection and change. But in addition to all of this, Phill is also a father, a husband, and a human navigating the very same political and cultural landscape as the rest of us. Today, we're diving into how we can sharpen our media literacy, how we can reclaim our personal narratives, and use storytelling as a way to create meaningful impact in our daily lives. Thank you for getting ready to create this space with me, and welcome. I took a deep dive into your work, and I actually watched your documentary recently, and it brought up so many things for me that I'd like to talk a little bit about. But before we get into that, I'd love to know, in your own journey, what stories did you have to unlearn or reclaim in order to become the person you are today?
Wow, that question has been top of mind for me as of late. I'm writing a memoir, which has taken shape in a way that I hadn't expected it to, which is what happens when you write. And it started in one place where I thought I was just kind of talking about my own identity and how I became who I've become now through my experiences. And it then turned into something where I'm looking at my relationship to myself and how I view myself through the eyes of other people. Um, and in the book, the primary relationship that I'm dealing with is my father. And I'm thinking about the ways in which I thought I had to exist in the world because of how he saw me. And, I saw him as a, masculine man who had served in the military and played football. And I was this small kid who liked to read and wasn't necessarily athletic in the ways that he was. And when I got through a few of the chapters, what I began to realize is that one of the things that I had to unlearn was that I had to stop looking for self in other people's reflection. So I'm looking at my mother to see how she approves of what I'm doing to know if I'm doing a good job instead of thinking about how I feel about what I'm doing. I'm looking at my dad, looking at his response to me, as opposed to ever sitting down with myself and say, how do I feel about how I'm moving through the world? So one of the things that I've had to unlearn is to stop looking at other people's responses to me first, and to kind of sit with myself a little bit more and to see how I feel about choices that I'm making and the things that I'm doing. That is a big thing that I've had to learn over the years, and to be okay with being a big one for me is being okay with knowing the truth
Mm,
about a thing
mm,
and not telling or saying what that truth is because not everybody can handle it. Because I used to be a person who knew it and would say it because I thought everyone wanted to know. But now I'm comfortable with knowing what I know without always telling people that I know it.
Wow, I share some of what you're talking about in that I too, and I think many of us, we grow up around people who have their own ideals and their own filters through which they see us and themselves and the world. And we quite naturally step into the world with carrying all of that. Um, how does a person know when the narrative that you're being taught isn't really yours or doesn't really work for you? Or I guess, how did you know?
For me, there was a point when I was, and you learn different things at different stages, right? That's what I know at my big age now versus at 13 is different, but it was a similar response to the world. I remember being in high school, I had skipped a grade, I had sailed through school doing really well on standardized tests and all of the stuff. Then I got to high school and I realized I had become this kid who was supposed to be smart, who was supposed to know all the answers, who's supposed to be a certain kind of way. And I began to resist that notion. Not that I didn't want to be smart, but I felt like I was more complex than getting good grades. And because I was seen as smart and quiet, um, everyone thought I was okay. So I started to think about who did I want to be? Was it my goal to get straight A's or was it my goal to be in clubs and to participate in school life and to hang out, to grow socially, to do all those things? And I think I chose in some ways to be as a protest to not get the straight A's like I had been doing, to resist some of the push because it felt like while I enjoyed knowledge, I did not enjoy the expectation that I'd be a certain kind of way without anybody. Like maybe I would have excelled in other things, but no one invested in that with me. It's like, oh, he's smart. We're gonna here's a new set of encyclopedias, for which I love because I read them. But maybe a pair of track shoes and take me out to the track because I like to run too. So like it was this thing where I started to feel in my body, right? And I can't explain that. You just know like, hey, I've gone too far down a lane and this is not exactly where I want to be. And I, now that I'm actually looking back at my life and writing about it, I can see all these little markers where I have at some point said, wait a minute, this isn't me.
Hmm.
And in whatever small way, try to pull back and try to get on a path that is more in line with who I thought that I was. Because, I mean, to be honest, you don't really know at first because you're being told who you are. Your parents possibly have chosen a religion. You live in a certain neighborhood. There are certain food aesthetics and cultural aesthetics that you're just supposed to latch on to. And then for most people, they're happy just being that thing that was kind of put on them. They're fine with it. They live it and they don't question it. I wasn't that person. And so I like to question um and I decided what would it be like to be Phill?
Mm.
And you pay a price for that, when you decide that. When you pay it, there's a cost for choosing to be yourself, to be an individual.
Wow.
And I think it's worth it.
Yeah, it's an investment for sure, and it can be a very heavy price to pay. We have, as I mentioned, some similarities, and I'm listening to you talk, and it's like I'm hearing myself through your words and through your sharing of your experience. In that I was raised by a father who was very, very powerful man and had very strong ideas about what success looked like. And there was this polarity, right? It's like either you succeed or you fail. And the success was determined by going down a particular path, getting good grades, going to college, picking a white collar profession, And that is how success was defined. And I also was a kid who was really, really smart. And I did very well on standardized tests without a lot of preparation. I just did. And what I'm, and I actually rebelled as well in high school because, and I remember my conversation with myself was like, you don't understand who I am, right? So, and I didn't understand who I was fully, but there was a conflict between what was expected from and of me and how I felt best in the skin of who I am and who I was. And so I kind of veered off in another direction and actually went so far as to go into corporate and to try to kind of please what his view was. And then eventually found that I was living in parts and needed to kind of re-find myself. And I think that the story you shared and my experience, uh, those are experiences that a lot of people, or a certain group of people, I think experience. I think there are some folks for whom that provide structure and a plan and can be very comforting. But for others, it can be a real challenge.
Yeah, that idea of veering off and finding that, okay, I made these choices and I wasn't in the park, but I was sitting there. And at one point, I don't know how these bills are getting paid. I don't know where I'm going to live. And maybe a friend will, let me sleep on the couch. This is the years I was living in LA, my early 20s, trying to make it because I believed I could. And and just feeling like there was still no place else I'd rather be,
Hmm.
you know, scrounging for coins so I can go buy a 99-cent chicken sandwich at Burger King and knowing there's a full refrigerator at home waiting for me in New Jersey if I chose to move back. I'm not going back because I think I'm supposed to be here,
Yeah,
even if I'm hungry.
yeah. Wow. That is wow. Yeah, I grew up in an upper middle class home in a brownstone in Brooklyn, and I had not before, at that point, I hadn't felt as free as I felt while I was just roaming around, you know, staying at friends' homes and uh, knowing that I could go home and I would be allowed home, and that life was different, but there was something else that I needed. What were you? Why did you come? Two questions actually. Where in New Jersey did you grow up? And secondly, why? What were you searching for in LA?
I grew up in Newark in Irvington,
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey, born in Orange Hospital. I spent my first years in Newark. We lived in Elizabeth for a little while, and my last years there were in Irvington when I was in high school. But I went to high school in East Orange, Catholic high school. Had about 300 kids in that little small school that is no longer in existence because those schools struggle to stay afloat. But I loved it, and I had a really interesting life there too because I grew up in what somebody would call, not don't use this term, but people would call the hood, and but it wasn't. I mean, people, it was fine. Like it wasn't way you see it in movies,
Mm-hmm.
and people were just hardworking. It was just what it was.
Right.
But within that, I could recognize that I was lucky in many ways that I have, for a time had both of my parents together, were married and both employed, doing pretty well, and had access to some resources. So like when I got older and they decided, hey, we don't know if the public school is the right fit, they were able to put me in the Catholic schools. So I lived this life where like I had friends who could have that choice made for them. And I also had friends whose parents were scratching and just trying to survive the day. And I think that was really good for me to see. Because I always understood that there were different ways you can go, and that it required different things of you um, to be able to live a life that maybe that you're dreaming of. And I don't know why, but I always wanted to be out from where I was. I was an avid reader. I knew the world was bigger than my neighborhood. I watched a lot of TV, as many latchkey kids did, and the world just seemed so big, and I wanted to see it. So when I went to college, I went to Hampton, had a blast, loved that experience. And when it was time to leave, I didn't have a job. I didn't want a corporate job. I wanted to work in the industry. I wanted to just be creative. And I had spent all this money, my mother had on tuition, and I didn't have a job. And I bought a one-way ticket to LA
Mhm.
because I felt like the life that I wanted was waiting for me there. And if I'm being honest, and this is going to be in the book, so I can't go too far, I think I needed to be away, as far away as possible from the life I had built to kind of maybe start a fresh one.
Mhm.
So LA seemed like a perfect place. It was just someplace I had envisioned my whole life. Never been, just that imaginary thing that you think about when you think about dreams.
Yeah.
And as soon as I could go, I went. I had nothing. I had no job. I had no place to live. I just moved.
Wow. People are often uncomfortable with truth tellers. And you've shared how you've learned how to manage the way that you navigate that gift. Because I think being a truth teller is a gift. And I also believe that it comes with the requirement that you learn how to hone it and how to wield it. And it's clear that you've done that, sometimes by not telling the truth when you see it. What advice do you have for others who may be grappling with being a truth teller in their own environments?
This is something that comes up a lot in my life, this idea of not only truth, but what is truth, right? When I was in my early 20s or mid 20s, I worked for the National Enquirer for a bit.
Oh, wow.
It
That's a
was a
blast.
blast.
That's a blast from the
A
past. Yeah.
blast.
Mhm.
Was making money, had an office on Hollywood. We were on Sunset Boulevard, a credit card. I'm a baby. I'm just out of college, American Express card and expense account. And I learned that these people were really working hard to get these stories. It wasn't just sitting around a desk making up things. So I had gotten this story about an actress, and it was true. I had done the reporting, I had gone to do the interviews, and it was something about their family, there being some kind of division in their family. So I called my mom and I sent her a copy of the article. It was a front page story, and she wasn't really happy about it. And I asked her, I told her I had made so much more money. Whenever you got a front page story, you got like an extra $500 to $2,000 sometimes for a front page story. So I'm excited. I'm 22, 23. I'm like, wow, I'm rich. So my my mother said, I don't know if I like this. And I said, why? And she said, well, I know it's true because I know what you do now. I understand what the Inquirer is now. I know that you're working. I know that you interviewed these people. I know that this is you sourced it. You have a degree in journal. I know you did the work. But is it something that everyone needs to know?
Mm.
And she said, we have things in our family, and you're working to become this person. Like, do you want everything that has ever happened within your family public because it's true? Is it okay because it's true? I'm not one of those people, she said, who doesn't believe the Inquirer is telling, the truth, because I think a lot of times that they are. I didn't know that before, but now I do because I have that access, that relationship with you.
Mhm.
But then her question but is that truth necessary for everybody? And it was such an impactful moment for me because I had spent so much time disproving people's belief that what we were doing was telling lies all the time. So I was like, no, I actually went here. Here are my sources that I had not really been thinking about whether or not it was anybody's right to know a thing. So that question from her changed how I move within the organization. And I pulled away. And now I still, that was one of the best experiences of my life. I met some amazing people, but I began to really think about what I was doing and what I was contributing to the world. And so what I often think about when people will talk about truth telling is what is the value of you telling that truth, speaking that truth? You know, is it something that the world needs, that your community needs, that you need? Um, and I often ask people if what they're speaking is truth or if it's just what's in their head. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because sometimes people just get to talking and saying whatever they're thinking and say, "Well, I'm a truth teller." You might just be being mean at this moment because you're
That's
having an
right.
emotional reaction to a thing,
Yeah.
and that's the truth is that you're mad at me right now, right? And but the biggest advice I think, and the thing I think about for myself is what's the value?
Yeah.
Um, and writing a memoir, I have this heavy burden on myself to not only tell the truth, but to think about the impact I'm having on these supporting characters who've been part of my life. So, which stories do I tell? How do I tell them? And which things are I'm willing to be said that I know may possibly cause some discomfort? And if I'm going to do that, what's the greater good of that? What is the purpose? What is the value?
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information. Yeah, I think it's also intention. What is a person's intention in speaking this truth, in air quotes? Because you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that we continue to talk about that topic of truth telling because that's the other side of it. The one side is, yeah, there's things that I can say because I see them. But why do I want to say them? And what's the benefit? What's the consequence of that? Is it to make the person, what is my intended consequence? Is it to make the person feel badly? Is it to hurt the person because I feel hurt by them? And I think that now in the day of social media and everyone kind of wanting to speak the truth, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of emotional sparring that takes place and a lot of opinions that are given about people, especially people who are in the public eye that
Oh, yeah,
that don't really take into account that there's a human on the other end of that
right.
opinion.
I'm not ready for that piece of it. I've already had people who I'm working with say to me, like once this book comes out and we're doing publicity, we kind of push you further out into that public
Yeah,
sphere.
yeah,
And I've always loved to write. And maybe when I was young, I wanted to be famous. Maybe. But now I don't necessarily. I want to be working, but somewhere halfway through the book, I realized, oh, they're going to spend money to promote this thing. And they're going to put me in front of, they're going to do their jobs. And that means that I have to, looking at my friends who are authors, who are public figures, I'm like, oh, they have to show up and be, and be on. They have people know them when they walk into spaces. And I wouldn't complain about having that level of success, but I've had to adjust my brain and start thinking about now people get to speak about me, in the ways that, I've heard discourse around other authors and their intentions and their writing. And I think because I've been doing this work so long as a storyteller on the stage, where I have had to use other people as part of my story, and I've had to do it responsibly, and I've had to have those conversations with family and friends about their usage in my stories, that I understand a little bit what that may feel like, and I'm kind of bracing myself for other people's truths about who I am or how they see me in my work. Um, and I think knowing that it kind of circles around back to you as well kind of makes me a little bit more responsible about how I deal with other people.
Yeah. And I think that taking that responsibility on, or understanding and acknowledging that speaking the truth is as much about telling a story as it is about also understanding that there are other people involved, and that you have a responsibility to at least engage them in what's happening, or share with them what it is that you have to say, even if it doesn't feel so good to them. My family story is an interesting one, and I've had people ask questions that in the beginning I felt slightly offended by, just because they were asking the question. It had nothing to do with the answer. It was just like, why are you asking that? And I began to pose the question back to the person. What was your childhood like? How was what happened in your family? Are your parents together or divorced? What was that like? And with love, but just with a slight kind of pushback, to confront and to give the person the opportunity to think about what they were asking of another human being, and the delicate nature of some of those questions. I would imagine, though, that with the experience that you've had in telling stories, that I think you'll be okay with the discourse around your book. You'll figure it out.
I think the hardest part will be family. A lot of my stories about family um, and relationships. And I think they're bracing themselves. They have no idea what I'm going to say. They know that I talk openly. So I think they're a little nervous. Um, but I think they know I love them enough that I'm not going to be reckless, with them, or any story that would involve them, even if it's not the most favorable moment or story.
Yeah.
I'm still not going to be disrespectful. I wanted to go back. You mentioned the social media piece, and I think this is really important. Truth is really interesting now for me because I think it gets confusing. So, a couple of years ago, one of my students, 'cause I taught college, and I had students who were then going into the world doing jobs in media where they everyone was a brand now. And I worked in marketing and all that stuff, but then now everyone is a brand, and the whole thing. And one of my um, former students, who I really respect, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant person. And this might have been around 2012, 2013, when people were just really starting to get into Twitter and Instagram and sort of how they presented themselves into the world in certain kind of ways. And what didn't make sense to me was this presenting things that look like someone caught you on camera, but really you've set up a mic, a light, a this, a that, and then you're pondering something with a beverage, and you're thinking about. I'm like, that's not true. Now, that's a photo shoot to me. And I remember getting into this discourse with this student, former student, and they felt offended a little bit by my question around, um, is this real or performative? Right? So we had a discourse around that. But now, fast forward a decade later or so, everything's that. Everything's, a setup.
Many things.
Like, yeah, so much of it is, um, crying on camera, but you set up the camera and posted it. that I believe truth has changed, that I think that is real to people now. That is now true. That is now how we communicate. That is now how we dialogue. So what might have looked false 10 years ago now becomes a way that people communicate. And it's tricky for me in the sense that as somebody who has studied literature, who has studied film, who analyzes conversation and people, that intention becomes really hard for me when I'm looking at a lot of what I see. And not even just content creators, but just people, because not all of it is for entertainment. Some of it is meant to be real life or to be news or to be. So that intention piece is so critical for me in the social media space. That's where we're consuming so many things. It's like, was your intention to get more likes? Or was your intention to tell this story, to say this thing? And I think about that a lot, let's say, when I see teachers in classrooms doing really clever things with their students. And I wonder, is this for the student? So I have a hard time sometimes parsing out how I feel. While everybody, oh, this is really fun. That's the best teacher because she's, pop locking with her students and it's great. And I'm going, it also feels narcissistic and performative. And I struggle.
Yeah. Is it a scene in a play, or is this a learning experience that will send the students off with more than they had when they walked in the room?
Yeah. And I see so much of that now that, I've stopped. Uh, I'm not teaching right now. After COVID, I unplugged. It was such a hard time,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw a lot of no one knew what was real or what wasn't anymore. Like it was really hard for students to distinguish. Um, and yeah, it's changing, and I have to work with that with my kids now because they'll see something and they think because they saw it on YouTube that it's true. And I have to teach them. No, that's just somebody with a camera.
Yes.
You don't know. And you have to start that early, you know. It's scary a little bit.
It is a little scary, but I think that one of the things that I was so excited about as I looked into what you've done and who you are, and how you shared and contributed, is that you really have this, you have the storytelling down packed, and you seem to understand that we are here writing a story, whether we're aware of it or not. And we are a character in a story about our world, and that we have the ability to create that character and recreate that character um, in a way that is best for us, or in a way that best suits who we are or what we want in the moment. And I think that's a very powerful thing to have and to realize and recognize about who you are in the world. Did you always know that about yourself? Or about the way this scene, because it's all a scene, right? I mean,
All
even
of
right
it.
now, right?
Because I'm doing this, like,
Yeah, it's
this
all
is
a
a scene.
scene.
Yeah.
This is a scene that you and I are in, that we've created.
Hmm.
Ryan is behind the camera, Billy's sitting back
That's
there,
right.
Yvette's, where she is watching, Parker's somewhere, and we are creating a space together. And I think that one of the things that I really feel drawn to about you is that you get it. So we can create in this moment whatever it is that we choose to. But it's not just about a podcast episode or an author and a filmmaker. It's the person who goes to the grocery store. It's the person who teaches children or adults. It's all of us have this ability to write a story and tell the air quotes truth. And what are we doing
Right.
with that? And you seem to really understand that.
I think having having had students, come to me and, outside of a classroom setting and say, that one day when you mentioned X, Y, and Z, which is totally not related to the content material necessarily, but me mentioning I have to leave early because it's about to snow and I have my babies are going to get out of daycare and someone has to be there. And, my husband is in Florida at a conference. And I've had students come to me and say, you know, I'm not out. Um, and just hearing you talk about having kids and a husband is really cool to me. Thanks for just thanks for giving us that. And I wasn't really thinking about an impact, necessarily. But I will say that I don't know that I had any professors that looked like me who lived the kind of life that I had openly.
Mm-hmm.
And it became clear to me that just my showing up was a story for some of these students who hadn't had either black professors, who hadn't had openly gay professors, who hadn't had professors who looked like them, who had families. And these students are now in their 30s and late 20s, and they're still reaching out and sending me pictures of their families or telling me about their accomplishments because they saw something beyond, of course, content. And I do think that is narrative. It is scene setting, making people feel comfortable and bringing yourself into the space. Because if you're going to, especially as a writing professor, English professor, you have to be human to exchange these ideas and really get um, to the material.
Mm-hmm.
And when I grew up, in Jersey, family would say, and it's funny now because I'm literally doing this thing. Something would happen crazy at a family function or over dinner, and someone would stand up and say, "Is this going to be in the book?"
Oh,
And look at me. Is this going to be in the
because they
book?
know,
I'm
they knew
15.
you're the
I'm
storyteller.
15.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
15. Is this going to be in the book? And here I am, literally writing the book,
Yeah.
and it's funny to them in some ways.
Yeah.
So whatever I was emitting then was signaling to them that, you know, that I not only that I was a writer, but that I was a storyteller of in some capacity. Um, but I think that comes from I did something that was really not one of my first stories on stage was about this. I did something that was really rare for I think a lot of um, Black families is that I just talked. I openly talked about things, like I asked questions, and that isn't always welcome. Or even if it's welcome, it's odd because so much is held tight
In secret. Yeah.
and secret. And here I come in the room, grandma, you know. So my youngest uncle is only 7 years older than me. Who was like, where's,
Mm-hmm.
help me do the math. And everyone's like, who asked that question? Me, because I'm wondering where everybody came from. And I've always been there because I like to piece things. I like to know where I am. And I think that's what storytelling and communicating is. It kind of situates you so you know where you are. My life has gotten exponentially better because of me writing and telling these stories. Because now when I walk into rooms with old friends, people who maybe have not met me, but they've seen some of my work, that they've already decided a little bit of what they think about me. And it's all, much of it's on the table. So I don't have to do a lot of that pre-work that I used to have to do with people in some cases. And it's just sort of changed my life.
Yeah. I think that people see who you are even before, sometimes even before you do. And that is the reason why a family can, at a dinner table, turn around and look at a 15-year-old young man and know that he is the storyteller. And I think that for those folks who are listening, who I hope now understand that we are all telling a story and we're all characters in someone's story, the more that we're able to look to the left and right of us and ahead and behind us, uh, and to be aware of who we are in the story, the better, the more power we actually have, and the more empowered our families, because we understand that it's not just about us in that moment, in that particular event, but it's about how we are contributing to the overarching story of a group of people and a community and a world and a city. And I think that if more of us took the time to really recognize and realize that and respect it, we could get moving into the directions that we really want to be in.
You know, I host a storytelling festival. This will be my second year doing it this coming May. And, something that we took for granted, just getting on stage and telling stories, has now become a little scary for people because people tell all kinds of stories about family, about sexuality, about gender, about and I knew I had been feeling like, I wonder what the world looks like for the next couple of years, getting on stage, and if theaters are going to feel scared with all their grant money coming in from wherever it's coming in to keep allowing us to get on stage, just do whatever we want to do. I just thought it was my own anxiety, just kind of getting ahead of myself. And I ended up talking to a producer last week about the festival, which is coming up, and asked if she wanted to maybe do something later on another date. And she said, I actually, it maybe I'm crazy. She said, but I'm actually not certain we'll be able to do this anymore. She goes, I've gotten to the place where I'm worried that storytelling is going to be in theaters. They're going to be so scared of putting out, work that, now would just set, used to seem normal, but will become something else in the coming months. Because I haven't put anything on my calendar past May. Because I'm not quite sure what kind of country we're going to be
Mm.
in the next couple of months. And it was really striking that this thing that I always thought was powerful now may be even more important because of the erasure that may happen because people are afraid of pushback around sort of hearing people's voices.
HaraHub Carlsbad is a co-working space and member community designed to empower entrepreneurs. More than just a workspace, HaraHub Carlsbad is a business accelerator and a connected network of successful entrepreneurs. Imagine a collaborative, serene, and spa-inspired environment where you can thrive. Our unique community allows each member to be both a guide and a student, fostering leadership and continuous growth for both you and your business. Experience an uplifting, supportive atmosphere that will elevate your entrepreneurial journey. For more information about HaraHub Carlsbad or to schedule a tour, visit harahub.com/Carlsbad. We also have locations in Temecula, Irvine, Washington, D.C., and HaraHub Carlsbad is one of 3 HaraHub locations in San Diego, the others being in Mission Valley and La Jolla. That was going to be one of my questions to you, and that is, with what's happening in the cultural landscape and societal landscape that we're living in, what is your advice to other storytellers in whatever capacity? Because the other part of it is that history erased goes away, so there is a chapter here, and there's a chapter that we're all living through. What does one do under these circumstances? I'd love to hear your voice in that.
I think we waited too long to have this wake up.
Mm.
Even before we had sort of political divide, what we should have learned from how we were using technology was that we can't keep storing our thoughts, our dreams, our research, our histories on devices and on platforms that change every 3 minutes, and collecting discs that collect dust that you don't have devices to open them up anymore. Um, that we were already losing history because of that. Having 40,000 photos on your phone that your kids won't be able to access to see themselves when they're 50. Like, we were already losing, right? The whole notion of a Black Twitter and all these Black spaces. You can't have a Black Twitter in a space that you don't own, not in any real way. So when people are lamenting, about who's running what, they've always been running it. So we've built dreams, hopes, empires on top of platforms and places that didn't belong to us. And now we're going, what we supposed to do? And I think at some point we have to decide if we want to go perform in a hole in the wall and tell stories like I did for many years. And that's how I cut my teeth and learned how to write. It's how I was able to get to the place I am now. I didn't need anybody's grant money. I didn't need anybody's anything. I knocked on the door until someone said, okay, enough. Here's a stage.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a Sunday afternoon or whatever. I'll take it, you know, and but it's yours. It's
Yeah.
yours enough. And I think your story belongs to you as long as you can write, you can produce it, as long as if you have a phone, you can record it. I had a podcast for a couple of years during the pandemic that I loved doing. The audience for that was crazy. Like I was recording that in bed on my phone, just random thoughts about what was going on. And it blew up. I was at home. I didn't go into a studio because I couldn't, you know, and but I had some things to say. And I think that's always been my advice to students is use what you have to do what you need to do. And don't be completely dependent on things that require too many gatekeepers, you know, because then you'll wait forever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say that my book is with a major publishing company, it's with HarperCollins,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my work is not. Most of my work has been independent work. I made a conscious choice to want the book to be someplace else. Uh, HarperCollins Amistad Press. That I wanted help with that because I felt like I wanted it to reach as many people as possible to then provide me the ability to still do independent work, you know. Um, but I think as a storyteller, your job is to tell stories and not wait for people to give you permission. And that's just been my biggest advice, and I had to learn that myself. Living in LA, it's all about being chosen.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot in LA. I had some amazing experiences. I mean, it was a great place for me to learn. I knew the industry, went to film school, like I did the whole thing. But I also waited too long for other people to say it's your turn.
You have to choose yourself.
Yeah. And I didn't get that until I left LA. And I started creating because I felt like it, you know. And all of a sudden, I'm flying back and forth to LA and to other places to do work, um, based on work that I'm creating on the East Coast, wherever I am. And it was a big wake up call for me to remind myself, you can't do all the things you want to do alone, but there are many things you can do. You need a couple of good friends sometimes to help you with the mic, somebody with some talent with the camera, and sometimes you don't need that just to get started. You just need to go on Google and figure it out, or someplace. I don't know if you're still using Google, but go someplace and figure it out.
I sit here today during this conversation as a student. I've gotten so many gems out of this conversation with you. And before you go, I want to tell you what some of them are. One is just do it. Say what you have to say. The second is that we're all storytellers. And I think as long as you're a human, you actually are a storyteller. Again, whether you realize it or not. And number three is there's a way to tell the truth with grace and respect and kindness and patience for the human experience and for where people are as they evolve or not. I feel very inspired by you. And I'm really glad that we've had a chance to connect. And I look forward and hope that we can chat some more when your book
Absolutely.
comes out, because I want to talk about that
Ooh.
book.
Yes.
I had heard about, it's interesting, just very recently, I heard about Moth for the first time. And so I was very excited when I read through your history and saw that you have spent a lot of time on that stage, crafting, honing your craft. How can we support you?
Whew. I went to a conference last week, and that was one of the questions that one of the moderators asked us to think about, on the sort of a wellness leadership thing that I was able to go to at the last minute. And that has been a struggle for me. The idea of, and this we can go on forever about why, but how to receive and what to even ask for, you know. So for me as a writer, as an artist, I think it is just go to my website and then that's things come up, and but I'm not big on social media. I mean, I use it. I'm not like 100 years old. I use it, but for me, it is conversations like this are great for me because they also make me think. And your voice is amazing. And and just they just make me think and process even how I'm moving through the world and rethink some things. But uh, really, for me right now, it is I am at a place where I am figuring out what I need. That is probably the most honest answer. I'm figuring that out now. I find so I'm listening to your introduction and I'm hearing all these the Emmy and all that stuff, and I'm just like, it doesn't even feel like that's me. You know, I'm exhausted. I have to tell you, I'm exhausted. I'm spent, and my when I walked away from the conference this last week, um, is that my goal for the next year is to figure out. They had this term called the energy gap, was to figure out where my ambition and work was in conflict with sort of time and what I really have to do, like raise my kids and things like that, because I can't run on empty. You know, I've been a solo for the most part. I mean, I need people for my films, but I work by myself. So my big plan for the year is to finish this book and then really think about how to call on the resources and the public who has been really supportive of my work, how to really call on them in a way that is meaningful. And right now, to be honest, I just don't know because I'm constantly, what's the next thing I have to do?
Getting to the next thing, telling the next story, telling a different version of the story. I
Mhm.
am going to boldly ask, request that we chat again. I believe that you and I could talk for hours. There's so many things that I wanted to say, but I'm like, you can't do that because you can't do that right now because we'll be sitting here for 3 hours and that's not going to work today. But I would love, Phill, if you would come back once your book is done
Absolutely.
so that we can chat a bit about that. And I'd love to start that conversation with hearing what you need and how we can support you. Because I think that when we get more comfortable with that, and I've struggled with that throughout my life, I'm getting better. I'm much better today. But when we learn how to ask for what we need, it opens up a door to our relationship with ourselves because it means that we have acknowledged our true value, our internal worth and value. And for the audience, there were 3 things from Searching for Shinnequa that I'd love to share really quickly. And if you can just really, really quickly speak to these 3 things, I'd really appreciate it. And these are 3 things that I noticed. One was that Chandrika liked her name until she was 5 years old, until she got to school, and until school told her and taught her to dislike her name. The second was a statement that someone made. I don't remember who, I know you do, that America makes you choose between success and culture. And that was so profound to me. And the third was there was a conversation, I think it was a book club, and someone in that group made a statement about a disparaging statement, respectfully, about someone naming their child Unity. And what I thought about when I heard that was how people have meaning that they apply to a name, and how people believe that they then have the right to grade that and rate that. And I just felt that coming from an audience that was Black, that it was just an unfortunate statement. I am standing for a world where people are allowed to just be who you are, and to be seen and respected and loved and welcomed based on who they actually are, versus the layers and layers of lens and filter that that we seem to have to go through.
One thing I learned doing the screening tour for Shinnequa, after we did the festivals, um, I have kids now, so that 5-year-old piece really is striking to me, because you see how much your kids start to change because other kids say things to them and teachers. So we have been very intentional about shoring our kids up as much as possible, so that we're giving them something that when they walk into those situations, that they have a little bit more sort of, protection from. They won't be immune to it, but they'll have, some steadiness because we've given them that.
And they'll be filled up. They're filled up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're very intentional about that. But we were on the screening tour, and we were in Harlem, and the discussion from every stop was names have meaning. Even if you know what they are, that person who named their kid Uniki or whatever, they had a meaning, and we shouldn't disparage. And Shinnequa McClendon, who is amazing, she's the one that was doing the stuff with the Congress, the White House, and all the things. The main Shinnequa in the film. We were in the panel, and she said, "You know what? I don't think my name has to have a meaning. My parents were young. They liked how it sounded. End of story." She goes, "Everyone in here is like trying to give me grace because, your mom and your parents, there was meaning for the name, so we shouldn't judge." She goes, I don't know that it was. It sounded pretty." But her point was, when you meet a woman named Lisa, you know, do you ask her what Lisa means?
Right.
Or Jen?
Right.
Or Katie?
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "So don't ask me what Shaniqua means. It's no different than those names." In the room, just kind of, she goes, "I know it's with good intention, but no one's asking anybody what Jackie means."
Right.
And those names may all have meanings, but we're not walking around thinking about it.
Right.
And it changed the discourse of how we talked about the film and the screenings. I think there are meanings for a lot of the people who give those names, but mostly, like you said, just for the most part, leave people alone.
Yeah.
Let them be. you know. So, some people have a really hard time with that.
I encourage those who are listening to watch Searching for Shinnequa. It is an eye-opening, very well done story about names and identity and perception. So I encourage you to watch that. And I encourage you to continue to follow and check Phill Branch out. He is doing an amazing thing during his time on this planet. Phill, I want to thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me. I look forward to reading your book and unpacking some of it, if you'll allow me to. And thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll be thinking about what I need and how to frame that and how to. I'll be
Please
thinking
do.
about it.
Please do.